Good evening, everybody. I'm Susan Wengraf. I am the District 6 Council Representative and currently also the Vice Mayor of Berkeley. Thank you so much for taking time to join us tonight for this webinar. I think we have enough people signing into the call to start. Before we get started, though, I want to take this opportunity to thank my assistant, Lori McWater, for her help in pulling this webinar together, and to thank the Transportation Division of the Public Works Department and the Fire Department for their collaboration. So tonight, we're here to learn about some new safety improvement proposals from the Transportation Department to address the dangerous conditions on the part of Marin east of the circle. It's about a 1 mile and a third very steep section from the circle up to Grizzly. This webinar is being recorded, and I'll be sending out the recording link to everyone who registered, in addition to including it in my next newsletter. After Public Works does their presentation, we'll have time for your input and questions. And we ask that you ask your questions verbally by using the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Well, we all know that Marin is a very dangerous street. Between 2012 and 2022, or 2023, actually, 6 people have died in crashes on the portion of Marin that we're going to be talking about tonight. And another 6 were very seriously injured. The street has a very steep grade, 24% in some places, and I think that it's probably the steepest street in the Bay Area. The street was originally laid out with the idea that a cable car would run on it, but that concept never came to fruition. In addition, Cragmont Elementary is bounded on the south side by Marin Avenue, exacerbating our safety concerns. So in the past years, I've tried to get some improvements on the street. We've had some success. We painted new double yellow lines the entire way from the circle all the way up to Grizzly. We repainted the crosswalks. We put in white stop bars, new signs. We painted red curbs. And in fact, we red curbed the entire block between Spruce and Cragmont. And we made the speed limit 15 miles per hour within 500 feet of the school when that state law passed, and we were able to do that. We also reduced the speed from 25 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour. And then I realized that the tonnage allowance on Marin was 4 tons, which seemed crazy to me. So I was able to amend the Berkeley Municipal Code to only allow 3 tons on Marin Avenue. But there's more to do. And now the Transportation Division has some additional ideas for improving safety on Marin. And that's why we're here tonight. So I'd like to now introduce you to our Director of Public Works, Terrance Davis. And Mr. Davis will introduce you to his team who's been working on this proposal. So with that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Again, Terrance Davis, Director of Public Works. Happy to be with you all, community members. So thank you for lending us some of your time this evening to hear about our ideas and get your feedback on this potential project. I have the pleasure tonight of introducing the team from Public Works and then also one of our colleagues from Fire. So here tonight with me is Wahid Amiri. He is our Deputy Director of Public Works, and Wahid is responsible for our engineering and transportation functions or divisions in the department. Also, we have Hamid Mostowfi, who is our transportation manager. So you'll be hearing from both of these gentlemen tonight for most of the bulk of the presentation. And then we also have Colin Arnold, who's the interim assistant chief in fire, who will be talking about some of the wildland fire and some of the other elements related to that we've contemplated for the project. So thank Colin for being here as well. So with that, what I'd like to do, Wahid and Hamid and Colin have a presentation. It's about 15 minutes or so. They're going to step through that presentation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to those gentlemen to proceed.
Thank you, Terrance. Good evening, everyone. So everyone can hear me and see me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you for the confirmation. So good evening, everyone. And thank you for being here tonight. As Terrance mentioned, my name is Wahid Amiri, and I serve as the Deputy Director of Public Works. I'm joined by our esteemed project team, and we're here to provide updates on the Marin Avenue Traffic Safety Project. Earlier this week, we had a productive discussion with Councilmember Han's constituents, and now we're eager to engage with Vice Mayor Wengraf's community here. Tonight's meeting is a very important step as we explore ideas and gather input on improving safety and accessibility along Marin Avenue. Our team has been working diligently despite significant challenges, like 24% staffing vacancy at the Transportation Division. We've been taking our community's feedback and safety concerns into account throughout this whole process. The good news is that while we are facing challenges with vacancies, through strong support and leadership from our Director Terrance Davis and other city leadership, we are able to bring on consultant support at this time to be able to help push this project forward and support city staff and move it forward. So tonight, we're excited to share some of our initial design concepts and key parameters with you. Our goal is to present the critical elements needed to enhance traffic safety while also exploring design options that improve the overall environment of all the road users, not one, not two, but our focus is all road users. This effort is very much a collaboration, and we're eager to hear your thoughts as we continue refining these plans together. But rest assured, we're not aiming to fast track. As eager as we are to implement improvements, we are taking a good pace, and this isn't our last discussion. There will be further opportunities to engage with us before the final design is set, ensuring that all of the community members that enjoy Marin Avenue, have lived there or traversed through there, has an opportunity to input and be part of the process. So let me go ahead and just frame up the project. As you can see in the slide, our boundary runs along Marin Avenue, stretching from the circle up to Grizzly Peak. Obviously, needless to say, but I will say that safety is our top priority here with this project. And the core objective of this project is to enhance traffic safety, as I said earlier, for all users, balanced approach, but with a particular focus on pedestrians and cyclists. By implementing these improvements, we aim to achieve better traffic calming, improve visibility, and safer crossings, okay? So with that said, I will hand it over now to Hamid, who is our superstar transportation manager, who's been here for a long time with the city, to walk you through the next few slides.
Thank you, Wahid. This is Hamid Mostowfi. So in trying to achieve the goals that Wahid outlined, we took a holistic view of the entire corridor between Marin Circle and Grizzly Peak. And we think we have a number of ideas that will help improve safety. So one of the very obvious things that we think we should formalize is prohibition of parking and stopping along the entire corridor. So one idea is to paint the entire curb on both sides of Grizzly Peak red, therefore formalizing the fact that no vehicles should stop at any time along that route. The second idea that we're looking at is, given that the width of Grizzly Peak is Marin Avenue is about 26 feet, we can implement some measures to narrow the lanes in both directions by painting, edge line marking, and cross hatch lines to reduce the through lanes to about 10.5, 11 feet in each direction. That helps give the drivers the visual cue of a narrower lane, and typically these sort of treatments does help in reducing speed. A third element that we looked at was looking at the intersections throughout this corridor. There are some, and the majority of which are in the uphill direction, which do not have any traffic control. So we're planning, through the help of our consultants, to collect traffic data, volume, speed, and evaluate which intersection it makes sense to install stop signs in the uphill direction. So, for instance, at Marin and Oxford, to the left, you see the present configuration, and if it meets the stop control warrants, then we're thinking of installing stop control in the uphill direction. And a fourth element that we looked at is how we could improve visibility, because there does appear to be sections of Marin Avenue where overgrowth and bushes are hindering sightlines, and that we're looking to work with our colleagues in fire department in identifying those areas and trim back, or in some locations, when warranted, remove some of the existing bushes. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Colin in fire department to go over some ideas that they have about improving sightlines.
Actually, I'll take the next slides and then I'll hand it over to Colin.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Hamid. So as part of this project, as Hamid mentioned, we are also focused on improving safety by enhancing the line of sight and visibility. As you can see from this slide, the current conditions are quite congested with overgrown vegetation, which obviously makes it very difficult visibility. It makes it significantly challenging. With the support from our fire department, Colin, who's here, and our friends at the Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront team who couldn't make it tonight, we've been collaborating and in addition with our consultant landscape architect to develop two options. We'll walk you through these two options in the next few slides, and then we'll bring in Colin to chat a little bit more as far as fire control and management along the corridor. So the first is the replan option. Based on our fire department's fire safe plan palettes, as you can see, this is one option that we're proposing as far as enhancing safety and increasing visibility line of sight. This is low maintenance. It will use native plants and which are already regionally adapted vegetation. For this option, if the community members chooses to go with this option, we will need community and agreement and commitment regarding watering or some sort of a watering program and some mild maintenance program. As you can see from the rendering, our primary focus is Marin, as I said earlier, and up and down Marin, probably 20 feet from the curb return, we are going to be focusing to see how we can manage vegetation and also look into a better option of replanting or a hardscape to be able to clean the line of sights. Although in this slide, as you can see, we do have a little bit on the side street, but our main focus, again, is on Marin north and south, okay? Here goes a picture of how it looks like right now, as you can see. And the next slide is an overlay of the option number one, which is to go back with the replan. And you can see the road profile, your face of curb, and then the new vegetation or plants would go into that strip here, and then you'd have your sidewalk. And the good part, as I said earlier, we are utilizing an approved fire department list of vegetation for various reasons, and the maximum height here, once fully grown, it would not exceed 30 inches. So that way we do not have to continuously battle line of sights, and hopefully we can get this corridor to be safe from that perspective once and for all. Okay, so again, I'll leave it here for a couple of more seconds just so people can take a look how it looks like before I move on. By the way, we'll put a quiz at the end of the presentation as far as the vegetation type and the names. It's a joke. All right, option number 2 is the landscape. As you can see from this plan view, again, the goal is here is to be able to achieve a good aesthetics. We're proposing the use of natural stone and boulders to enhance aesthetics with minimal maintenance. From the 2 options, obviously this is a little bit costlier, but given the steep slopes that the Vice Mayor mentioned earlier, we're also going to be using angled stone to prevent rolling down the hill. And obviously with this type of arrangement, it'll be also friendly to our stormwater management plan and regime for the city. But again, it is going to be a little bit costlier, but this is what it would look like as far as the boulders and the angled rocks. This slide gives you some ideas and some options that, again, as I mentioned earlier, we'll work through the community and vet through whatever the decision is. Again, current photo of the corridor or that section, and an overlay of how it would look like with the boulders and the angled rocks. Again, your road profile, your face of curb, you have your boulders, big pieces, angled stones, and your sidewalk. Okay. And as we display this slide showcasing some of our recommendations for the plan selections, now I'll turn it over to another superstar from our fire department, Colin, who is currently our interim assistant fire chief, to discuss the vegetation management efforts that will take place along the whole corridor. Our project will focus on intersection specific, as I mentioned, up and down, but our friends at the fire department, obviously for many reasons, they're looking a lot holistically, and they have a lot more involvement with vegetation management. So with that said, Colin, I'm going to hand over to you, sir.
Thanks, Wahid. And for the record, you have no idea whether I'm a superstar or not, but I was ready to handle all of those slides. Hey, good evening, everybody. Colin Arnold. I'm the Assistant Fire Chief in charge of the Wildland Urban Interface, which is Fire Zones 2 and 3. That's really everything east of Shattuck in some areas and Spruce and others, but all of Councilmember Wengraf's district. Public Works approached us about this project for a number of reasons, but one of the happy circumstances is that we also have a CAL FIRE grant lined up to do evacuation route clearing, and Marin is one of the targeted streets for that. So this created a pretty good opportunity for us to tackle 2 issues at the same time and address issues on Marin all at once, rather than having to close sections of it multiple times for different reasons. First and foremost, in terms of participating in what Transportation and Public Works is trying to do here, we have one goal down low in the 30 inches and less, and that's to really prune back a lot of this vegetation within 20 feet of an intersection. The other goal we have is to do general cleanup and general landscaping consistent with the fire code all along the Marin corridor in the public right of way. So this evacuation route clearing would involve addressing all areas that are within the city right of way, and on Marin that generally extends from the outside of one sidewalk to the outside of the other. And we would bring it into compliance with the fire code, which everybody on this link is probably somewhat familiar with from the inspections that we do throughout the district. The work that we would do would in fact be a little bit more restrictive than what we generally enforce with inspections. The city has trees in there that get hazardous vegetation in the form of juniper and some rosemary in those planter boxes. And in terms of best practices, we would prune those trees up. We would create separation between the trees where it doesn't affect the health of the tree, and in many ways actually makes the tree healthier. And then the hazardous vegetation like rosemary and juniper, where it exists in the right of way, we would remove. And then the other thing that we would do, because we're in there anyway, is depending on the outcome of this plan, We would either be trimming vegetation way back within 20 or so feet of an intersection, or we would be setting that area up to replant, or we'd be setting that area up to do the hardscaping that we suggested. The reason I'm here is because we are doing additional work outside of what transportation is doing. We wanted the public to be aware of what was happening with the fire code and the work that was happening. And excuse me while my kids are working their way through bedtime in the background. That's the nature of what we're trying to tackle. And there may be some questions regarding some of the work that's happening. The biggest impacts folks will notice is that where your vegetation crawls out over the sidewalk or overhangs the sidewalk, you can expect us to trim that back to the property line. Where trees are less than 13 feet 5 inches from the road along Marin, you can expect us to limb that up. Like I said, you can expect us to remove hazardous vegetation in the form of rosemary and juniper. And then you can expect us to do a general upkeep and trimming back and limbing up of small bushes along the road, both in terms of visual sight lines for safety, and then also just removing or making a more ember resistant area so that that evacuation rack can remain clear in the event of a wildfire. If there's any questions, I'm here for you. I look forward to answering whatever you may have.
So that concludes our formal presentation. So as Colin indicated, we're all here for any questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, just a reminder to to ask a question, use the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. My assistant Lori will call your name in the order it was received and allow you to unmute your microphone so you can ask your question. Okay, here we go.
All right, Michael Katz, unmute yourself.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. A lot of this sounds like basic common sense, and it's great. I hope the city can get the funding for the signals. The cable car would be nice too. But I have a two-part question. I believe Hamid said the goal was to remove all parking on Marin, but to narrow the lanes with crosshatching. And so the first part of my question is, how is that effective? It seems like if you want to psychologically narrow the lanes, it's actually more effective to have parked cars there to create hard barriers. The second part of the question that goes along with this is, I'm shocked to hear about 6 fatal collisions and 6 serious collisions. And I'm wondering how much of this is rooted in analysis of where and why those things happened, which might require more location-specific changes than changes along the whole street. So those go together. Thank you.
I can take that question. So the reason why we're not considering formalizing parking is that the narrow width of the road is 26 feet wide, 13 feet in each direction. For a standard parking lane, we need 8 foot, an 8 foot wide space. So that would leave about 10 feet for 2 lanes, which would not be practicable. So that's one that's the main reason why we're not considering allowing on-street parking. And the second part of the question, could you repeat? You mentioned something about the fatalities.
Yeah, so, and I think that the community members dropped off, came in and kind of had to exit the ability to be on the panel. But if I can restate what I think I heard was around, the 6 fatalities that occurred. And if that was the case, it sounds like there should be some additional consideration of interventions specific to where those occurred and kind of some of that history and taking that into account as we propose any safety improvements. I think that's the gist of what the individual was suggesting.
I think the most recent three fatalities that I recall. The last one was the unfortunate fatal collision at Oxford where a lady jogger got run over. Through the coordination and cooperation with police department, we reenacted that collision, and it seemed that none of the typical or expected factors that are usually we see in other collisions were present. In other words, the westbound vehicle that collided with the pedestrian had come to a complete stop. The jogger who apparently was wearing headphones was focused on the uphill traffic, which makes sense because I think the majority of the locals are aware that the uphill traffic does not come to a stop, and then proceeded to continue through the crosswalk, and then the stopped vehicle, upon moving for whatever reason, did not see the pedestrian and unfortunately hit her. The previous two fatalities were as a result of the mechanical failure of the car going downhill, which created the unfortunate two other fatalities. I don't have a recollection for the other three fatalities mentioned, but that's what I know about the recent fatalities. But one of the measures that we're looking at, which is through collection of traffic data and evaluation for stop control, is precisely to address the potential reason for the latest fatality, which was concern about uphill traffic not stopping.
Okay, if we're ready for the next one, Jonathan Canner. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, one problem I've noticed in driving that road for 45 years is line of sight for people crossing. I don't know if simply getting rid of the vegetation is the answer, but at a lot of intersections, a crosser is kind of standing off of the road, and because it's so steep, they're not seen until you're right on top of them. And I'm wondering if something like a crossing light that they have at other intersections might be considered for some of the steeper areas that may not be helped with vegetation clearing.
So as Hamid mentioned earlier, and I mentioned also, we do have a traffic engineering consultant who is coming on board to be able to look and assist with those type of issues. We feel that, for example, at Oxford, as Hamid mentioned, we were out there and reenacted, and it's just a series of unfortunate events or issues that led to the fatality. But we are going to look at installing a stop sign uphill to help prevent that, so that way their vehicles are coming to a stop. But as you can tell, we don't want to create another issue or a challenge for the community members by implementing some solution. So meaning that we want to look at it holistically to see what that means in the circle as far as queuing our ADT. So as I mentioned earlier, that this is our first check-in, just to kind of hear your thoughts and ideas. But the plan is to go out there with our engineering team from traffic side, and also with our fire department team to look at the vegetation, and also landscape architect consultant to be able to look at it holistically and then come back with a fine design.
Yeah, I just wanted to indicate that certain I can't even tell you which ones they are, but there's certain intersections where you come upon them and you don't see people.
Yep,
And
100%.
I don't think it's the trees. I just think it's the nature of the steep grade.
Yeah, and you got a very good point, and that's some of the stuff that our engineering team, internal and consultant, will take a look at.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, the next person is Brent Blackaby. Unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi there. Thanks, Vice Mayor Wengraf. Thanks to Public Works, and thanks, Colin. Two-parter. One is on the vegetation removal. We've heard a lot, again, useful about improving sight lines and limbing up trees. one question is, would you envision, are there any areas where you may have to remove trees that are obstructing or that are in the way? That's, I think, one question. And the second, following up a little bit on Jonathan, is I understand some of the sensitivity about adding the stop sign for coming uphill, but I'm, as someone who drives from Grizzly down to the Circle almost every day and does the full 1.3 miles, the downhill speeds and losing kind of control on the downhill speeds are a big concern. I think there's anything else with the traffic consultant that we can do to more aggressively try and reduce the downhill speeds, whether it's signage, raised crosswalks, whatever. But that's to, you know, we talked about the one fatality, which was losing control of the vehicle, kind of a mechanical failure, but is there more we can do on speeds coming downhill? So I guess those are my two questions: trees, and whether you anticipate having to remove any trees, and two, the downhill speed and options for more aggressive management of that piece. Thank you.
Maybe I can take the downhill speed question, Wahid.
Yeah, and if Colin wants to take the tree, I know he's not PRW, but talking to Parks, Recs, and Waterfront, they are looking to the trees, but we'll definitely not touch any healthy trees. I did hear, and again, in all true transparency, that there might be one diseased or dying tree out there that I heard during my meetings and a lot of coordination with Parks and Recs and Waterfront, that they will take a look at it. But there's nothing right now on our plans that would indicate a tree removal. But if we do run into a location that it is deeply impacting line of sight, then we'll take it into consideration and bring in the arborist and take it from there.
I'd add that in terms of the fire code, it's pretty rare for us to mandate removal of trees, and as far as I can tell, has not happened. This is not a situation where we anticipate removing trees for our side of the house in terms of fire code. But as Wahid mentioned, if Parks does find a tree that is otherwise unhealthy and needs our support, then we would. But I do not know of any plans right now to remove any of those trees.
Hamid, you want to take the traffic?
Hamid, you want to take the last part of that?
Yes. So in terms of other ideas about reducing downhill speed, one of the things that we looked at was the idea of rumble strips. The problem with rumble strips is that the noise that it makes throughout all hours of the day and night. So again, it is something that is doable, but it would very much depend on the consensus of the neighborhood. Regarding the question or the idea of a raised crosswalk, because of the very steep gradient of the roadway, it becomes very difficult for it to be effective. Because if you imagine you're going downhill at 24% and then you have to jump up a raised crosswalk, that not only could probably in most cases lead to the underside of the car hitting the raised crosswalk, but also have a I guess shocking effect on the driver, which might lead to undesired reactions. So if typically on flat roadways, that is something that we do consider and we have deployed, but I don't believe in this case it would be effective. Not only that, it would probably have some other unwanted ramifications.
And if I can just add to close it, that's one of the main goals, is to slow this down, is by narrowing those lanes. I know that the effort might seem light, but we are going with thermoplastic. But there's a lot of studies and proven cases nationwide that shows the benefit of how just that visual narrowing the lanes does help reduce speed. So although Hamid discussed all of the internal engineering assessments that we've done to see what's out there, what can be done effectively and safely, we do feel that a good element of this, by prohibiting the parking and narrowing the lanes, will achieve the slower speeds that we're all looking forward to.
Okay, we'll have the next question from Alessandro Ori.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for this update. Has been really great. And my point was that having lived in Marin for a while, I think I was kind of shocked by two aspects. One was the sheer amount of traffic that goes through that street, number of cars per second. And the second one was the speeding also uphill. These cars accelerate strongly, probably because of the steepness. And I know you have covered already a little bit the speeding. My point is that, is there any plan to evaluate any measure to try to reduce the amount of cars that go through that street? Because that's, I think, is another major risk factor for pedestrians.
I can take that, and maybe Hamid can chime in. Are you okay with that, Terrance?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So obviously we all have, the applications on the phones that kind of, whether internal or external, that leads you to there. We're hoping through some of these measures that the algorithms change, so that way it's not the desired path or the quickest way up and down through the various connection points. That's number one that we're trying to hopefully achieve. Number two, just redirecting traffic will end up having vehicles go to other locations, and we really have to look at that holistically, because there are a lot of other streets within the hills that are very narrow, that are not as safe. So that's one of our main concerns, is that to recirculate vehicles, it'll be a challenge, and unfortunately the lay of the land doesn't allow it very easily. Hamid, I know you might have some thoughts about this too.
No, I just echo what Wahid said in terms of redirecting traffic through even more residential neighborhoods where the geometry is far more windy and narrower. So I think we need to be careful, even if there was a sort of measure that would help or constrain through traffic just to local traffic, then that non-local traffic, like water, would find its way around the nearest adjacent roadways down and up.
And it just to tie all that up, what we're hoping for really, as we reduce speed and do some narrowing there, is that over time, as that happens, because the apps are built for efficiency, that if we have non-local traffic that's there, which is certainly everything that we know that it's present, that over time that traffic will find another path based on, as Wahid said, the algorithm. And so you'll see some reductions over time in traffic as we slow down Marin. So we've seen that kind of effect be successful in other places as we have reduced speed. And so that is the primary strategy for us here, to reduce what I would say is non-local traffic in that area.
Okay, Nancy Rader is the next person to ask a question.
Hi there, good evening. Thanks very much for this presentation. It made a lot of sense to me, a lot of common sense measures. I do think the hedges near the corners are a big problem with line of sight. My question was whether the number of fatalities, whether it is in fact 3 or 6. Somebody said their memory was 3. When I did the search on the UC Berkeley TIMS database, I get 3 from 2012 to 2024. So I wonder what your source for that 6 is. And that's my question. Thank you.
I guess I have to answer that one. Nancy, I'll have to get back to you on that. I think I read that in some news article, but I will have to track it down. But I can tell you, going all the way back to the 70s, there was a terrible tragic accident. 2 teenage girls were coming down Marin from a party, in Park Hills, and they ran out of gas and they turned the ignition off. And in those days, when you turn off the ignition, everything stopped working. And they went into a telephone pole at Cragmont School. And unfortunately, one of the young women lost her life, and the other one was very, very seriously injured. There have been others. There was a pedestrian who was crossing at Euclid fairly recently who was hit, and I believe she later passed away from her injuries. But let me get back to you, Nancy, on that to verify your question.
Okay, and I did send you an email already on that. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Just, this is Hamid. Just to clarify in my earlier statement, I said I was familiar with the circumstances of the last 3 fatalities, not that I was denying other fatalities.
Okay, great. So the next person is Michael Scandling. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, several things. One idea might be to have lighted crosswalks, as some municipalities do. I'm just going to reel these off quickly. Another one is on the looking downhill on the corner of Marin and Oxford on the left, which is where the jogger was coming from, apparently. The light is very often very blotchy. And I actually almost crossed the intersection after stopping, just simply not seeing someone standing there because they were wearing a combination of light and dark clothing, which just matched the blotchiness of the light that was already there. I don't know what can be done about that, but it's something to be aware of. The last one is more of a cultural thing. I come from the South Bay, where what I'm about to say is not necessarily true, but in Berkeley, broadly, people have a tendency to cross the street without looking in many cases, often with their head in a device and often with headphones on. And I'm not sure what to do about that because it's an ingrained culture. It also has to do with further down the street, crossing the street on the circle, where on numerous occasions, someone has crossed the street, causing me to stop in the middle of the circle and almost having a 3-car multi-rear ender, which ironically might have pushed me into the pedestrian and killed them anyway. I'm not sure what to do about this cultural issue, but it is an issue. Also, there are, as you've noticed, a lot of trucks over 3 tons, and they do tend to go up the street or down the street really rapidly, way beyond the speed limit. Also, especially on weekends, we have non-resident people going up and down the street really fast. I dare say because it's fun. So there you go. There's a whole bunch for you.
Yeah, and regarding the vehicles and speeding, although we're trying to engineer some remedies here, we are coordinated with public safety, and I do think we might partner up with them for some sort of surveillance in that area, just to kind of help out with these remedies, just to track to see how things are going out there, especially if you guys are seeing consistent speeders up and down. I do think their presence will help, particularly with vehicles that are not following the posted weight limit. I know there's construction out there, and unfortunately, they can't be there all the time, but I do think it'll benefit the situation if they do a couple of rounds up, down, just show some presence.
And the comment regarding the lighting situation is certainly something we'll take into advisement, look at the photometrics. It hasn't been something that's come up a lot in these discussions, so thank you for that feedback. It's certainly, again, something we can take a look at if that will, we've kind of focused much more on traffic and looking at counts and speed. So thank you for the feedback. And we'll certainly fold that in if we can.
Yeah, Terrance, I wonder, we could probably talk to Parks too, because if we're going to be up there doing some tree work anyway and some cleaning up, if there's areas You know, I wouldn't think to look down at the street or at the ground as we're doing that tree work, but that's an added bonus if we can maintain the health of the tree and clear up some of that, you know, dappled light. That's a great suggestion, and we'll work on that too.
Absolutely.
Right, okay. The next person is Beth Feingold. Please unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi there. I also, like Michael, live near Cragmont School, and I'm one of those crazy Berkeley Hills walking ladies. So I have lots of experience with all of these intersections, and I think it's speeding. I can stand in a corner and watch 10, 15, 20 cars go in each direction, and they do not see me.
Hmm.
And of course, I don't step out because I'm scared to death of getting hit. The crossing guard, if I'm walking at those times for the school, is wonderful. I worry about her getting hit. The speedometer that was put in after the town hall that we had, I think it was about 2 years ago, seems to be invisible to the drivers coming downhill. And I think it's worse coming downhill than going uphill. But I don't see people looking for pedestrians when they hit the crosswalk. Now, I don't know what the answer is. Perhaps it's reducing the speed or having more posted speed limit signs. So that's my experience walking. And of course, it's not just Marin in the Berkeley Hills, where districts 5 and 6, where people are just, I think they're not paying attention. So anything you can do will be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. And that's what we're hoping through this project, is to decrease the speeds through these measures that we've discussed. So, well, as I said earlier,
agree with Michael about those lighted crosswalk things. I don't know what they're called, where they it's embedded in the street and you push a button and they flash.
yeah, in pavement flashing beacons. Yeah, those are for mid-block applications usually. So here we have the controlled intersections.
Oh,
Yeah. But, you know, I don't want to give all the good news. I know I heard Craigmont School a few times. So there's, as part of this assessment, we are looking a little bit deeper in that area as well too, because we've received feedback from Vice Mayor's office. And we're trying to concurrently, while we're out there, to see how much good we can accomplish with the very limited budget that we have. But we are going to take a look at intersections around that area as well to see whether this project or the safe routes to school, how do we make it a little bit better out there?
Okay, the next person up for a question is Krista Denton. Krista, you can unmute yourself. Okay, well, let's go to the next person. Jonathan Canner. Unmute yourself.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to bring up, which hopefully the traffic engineer will look at, you know, the uphill stop signs are a problem, particularly in the steeper areas in terms of, you know, during busy traffic hours, you know, cars are backed up one to the other. People with stick shifts roll backwards. Sometimes people stall out. It's a very kind of dicey thing moving up the hill slowly. So, you know, I hope that putting in stop signs does not aggravate the situation, causes other kinds of accidents and danger.
it's a great point, and that's why we want to take a look at it holistically and look at every intersection, look at queuing, look at those negative impacts, look at it from an environmental perspective too. Obviously, we don't want cars to just be at idle, increase in environmental factors either. So again, we're not rushing it. We're going to do a deep engineering dive into all these elements and then come back to the community members.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, we're back to Krista. Go ahead and unmute. You should be able to see your unmute button on the bottom of your screen. Still raise hand. Hmm.
Okay, Lori, I think.
Yeah.
um,
Okay, well, that was our last one.
Yeah, as Krista, maybe Krista can fiddle with it and try. There she goes. Okay. Krista, can you speak now?
Yeah.
Still,
No. Okay. All right, I just wanted to ask everybody on the call, we haven't heard anything about the vegetation management proposals. Do any of you have any input for us on that? We welcome your comments.
All right, Nancy Radar.
There, yeah, I was gonna mention that last time. Yeah, I love the idea of doing the hazardous vegetation management at the same time. It's awesome. I kind of like the greenery, the ones with actual green things in the in the strips. Seems like that would be more nice like looking. I also had one other follow-up question on the enforcement. Somebody suggested maybe you could do a couple passes of enforcement. I'm wondering about, you know, more ongoing enforcement. I think people need to know that there's a good chance they're going to get a speeding ticket because it is very scary to cross because people go so fast. So I just also wanted to sort of citywide, what is our, you know, do we do speeding enforcement? I don't notice that going on. So thank you.
Yeah, we do, and I'll turn it over to Hamid. So you know, this comes up frequently. Obviously, as Public Works, we're department. We can't speak specifically to police departments, operations, and their resources. I do know. I think they have about 3 enforcement officer resources dedicated to traffic. So there are some limitations. But they do enforcement activity, and certainly we're in conversation with them as we do these traffic and transportation safety projects around kind of key areas to try to make what I would call kind of surge enforcement actions. So that is a possibility, although I will just say it is a fairly limited resource. So, and we can, you know, have someone from police get back to you with some specifics about that, since it's a resource that we don't control. But with that said, Hamid, do you have something you want to add?
No, actually, I was going to basically say what you said in that, not wanting to speak on police department's behalf, but I know that they have 3 speed enforcement officers that need to spread throughout the city. So much as we would like to have regular speed enforcement on Marin, from a resource standpoint, I think they'll be they are strained. But that's something, as Terrance said, that we are in conversations with them.
Okay, John Baylor, you're up for a question.
I came in a little late, so I didn't see quite how far the vegetation management change went, but I'm definitely in favor of it, especially at, say, Euclid and Marin. It's a lot of like eye level high bushes there.
Yeah, John, thanks for the comment. I think I don't know that we've settled yet on a specific distance back from the intersection that we would lower that line of sight vegetation. The number 20 feet from each corner has been thrown around. I would think that engineers would probably weigh in a little bit further. There are potentially sections in the middle of each street where we would just do some limbing up and trimming of existing vegetation. Especially in between trees mid-block where sight lines to intersections aren't a problem. But absolutely, yeah, within a certain distance of each intersection, we'd be participating in that process along with whatever the recommendations of the landscape designer were, in coordination with what the public suggests there in those corners.
Cool, looking forward to it. Thanks.
All right. Krista, we're giving you a last chance here to unmute yourself. All right, we're going to go on to Susan Brand. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was curious, you might have said this, but I know, just going on Craigmont where I go and then turning right onto Marin, I'm always at the mercy of my neighbor because I can't see up the hill unless he trims his bushes. And sometimes he does, which is great. And I'm curious, like, who is paying for this? Who maintains it? How that would work? You said you alluded to it, but I don't think I quite understood. Thank you.
So the current vegetation, I'll let Colin talk about it. But as far as the proposal, from the fire department's list, those vegetation would not grow higher than 30 inches. And that was in one of the slides for option 1, which we talked about vegetation or replanting option. We will need the community's commitment and agreement for watering and also maintaining. But again, going back with replanting at these locations, the height will not be anything close to what some of you are experiencing out there right now. As I showed some renderings that I think Vice Mayor will share the slides if you haven't seen it, but if you look at the profile, it won't go higher than 30 inches. So hopefully that helps out the situation.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, all of you, for all the work you've put in.
Susan, the only other thing I'd mention is that if the vegetation you're talking about is on the property outside of the sidewalk line, feel free to, you can email us if you feel like it's a fire hazard, and our email is wildfire@berkeleycity.gov.
Yeah, it's not the fire hazard, it's the sight line. You just can't see the cars coming down Marin.
I understand that.
Thank you.
All right.
If that's the case, then email Hamid.
Okay.
I'm joking. No, don't email Hamid.
Okay.
All right, we have one last hand. It's from Michael Scantling.
Hi, one more thing. Just in favor of the vegetation rather than the hardscaping, we envision a situation where deer would be kicking gravel into the street and thereby creating something that's unsightly and perhaps a safety hazard. And then this last thing, I'm going to hate myself for suggesting this. I understand the issue of raised sidewalks or crosswalks, but speed bumps in the middle of the block wouldn't have the bottoming out problem that you'd have as the cross street levels out. And as I said, I hate myself for suggesting that because I'll have to deal with them myself, but I think it's worth it, quite frankly.
I mean, do you want to take that or just note it?
Yeah, I think if we were to consider speed humps, we would definitely consider it in the downhill direction and not the uphill direction. But then, because it would make the uphill traffic even more sort of difficult to maintain their momentum. But then what that could create is for some of the more creative downhill drivers to encourage them to go around that speed hump in the downhill direction. So it's a bit of a a double-edged sword. So just my immediate reactions to that idea.
My concern is how many flying vehicles we might see
Yes.
Unfortunately.
So I think I don't see any additional hands. But I'm wondering if Terrance, you might be able to tell us what the next steps are.
Absolutely. So Vice Mayor, you know, this is the second of a few community meetings we're doing. And as Wahid indicated, we'll continue to gather feedback. So thank everyone who spent some time with us tonight and gave us some good ideas. It's very, very helpful and we appreciate that. So this is still conceptual, I would say. And so from our perspective, you know, we're doing this work. We still need to, there's still some budget action that the council will need to do to fund the project. And whether this project gets additional legs and becomes larger, that is a decision of the council ultimately. So we'll present that project to them for consideration and funding. We think we have a funding source, and so, but it's still, we don't appropriate funds, the council has to do that. So that will be an immediate next step. In the interim, we continue to work on kind of these ideas in the background that we've talked about. Colin, the work that Colin has is grant funded. So there is a potential that we could phase some of those elements in advance of some of the other traffic and transportation safety improvements. And so we'll work out that schedule as we continue to get feedback. But the immediate next steps will be to continue to take this feedback. We'll go back and continue to refine our design elements. As we go into the next budget revision cycle, which I think will happen, you know, towards the end of this year, there'll be some budget requests to continue to add some funding to the project. And then we'll finalize some designs at that point. There have been some requests as we talk to other community members about doing broader traffic studies and counts. We will advance those. They're not terribly expensive and gather some additional data. And our goal is always, as we have that data, is to try to stitch together as many grant opportunities as we can. So if there's safe route opportunities or other things, and then we'll try to stitch those things together. So I think, and Hamid can speak to general timeline, but assuming we got funding for this project and Colin's grant advances, we would be looking at something in fall of 25, or excuse me, spring of 25 as kind of a general timeline where you might start to see some of the early improvements. Is that accurate, Hamid?
Yeah, I think within the next 2 to 3 months, we're hoping to gather our data, do the evaluation, and come up with some initial set of ideas. So in about 2 to 3 months, we should be ready to come back to the community, share with them the results of our investigation, and offer some options, and then take it from there.
Right. Okay.
So I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, so I think the presentation tonight will make available through your office. There is an email that is there. And if anyone in the community has additional feedback or ideas, they can certainly send that. It goes directly to, it goes to Hamid and Wahid and his staff, not directly, but indirectly. But that's a great way for us to continue to hear feedback and, keep the dialogue going. So we'll make sure that that's available for you as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you, all of you, for the presentation and for your information and experience. I think I need to have a conversation with you, Terrance, offline about this budget request, because I'd like to get it in before my tenure elapses. Thank you to the community for coming tonight. And we will keep you updated as this project progresses. So thanks very much and good night. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.